All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome in. So it's Monday morning here, early Monday morning, and I wanted to go over some of the coaching rumors, some of the reports that we got today, just where things stand. This seems to be the week where things are going to start to heat up. Teams are going to start making their final decisions here. And, obviously the Jets are still searching for their general manager. And up to this point, we still don't have the second list of interviews. I'm assuming that that's going to come out at some point today, tomorrow. I mean, God, it's got to be soon here, right? But in any case, let's start first with the Las Vegas Raiders. And the Raiders are an interesting team because of how they've operated this offseason, right? Not firing Pierce on Black Monday, then firing Pierce on Tuesday, taking head coaching interviews, and then firing Telesco on Thursday. Very weird timing, just an odd situation to say the least. Well, it's looking like Ben Johnson and the Raiders, right? We continue to see a lot of smoke here. Supposedly, the Raiders are going to be making a quote-unquote big push to land Ben Johnson at some point this week. They're trying to get that in-person interview scheduled for this week as well. And with this, it just feels like where there's smoke, there's fire. And yes, of course, you could argue Ben Johnson makes sense in Jacksonville. Ben Johnson makes sense in Chicago over the Raiders, right? The Raiders don't have a quarterback. The Raiders roster isn't really the most talented at this point in time. They're playing in a really, really tough division with Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes still in the playoffs. Sean Payton, Bo Nix, playoff team. Jim Harbaugh, Justin Herbert, playoff team. It's a really, really tough division, right, in that AFC West. So we'll see how this whole Ben Johnson thing, transpires with the Raiders. Personally, I do feel like I'm buying in to the rumors there. I really think that interest is strong. Obviously, you have Tom Brady coming in and having that impact. So we'll see. We'll see how the whole Ben Johnson in Vegas thing plays out this week. Now, the trickle-down effect from that is supposedly the Jacksonville Jaguars love Ben Johnson, but if Johnson ends up going to Vegas or Chicago, they could pivot to Liam Cohen. Now, the latest reports coming out of Jacksonville is that the Jaguars, supposedly, they're really high on Liam Cohen. Obviously, Liam Cohen, an offensive mind, he'd be a first-year guy, so they'd be kind of pivoting away from the Doug Peterson era, right, where you kind of felt like it was his way or the highway. The whole Press Taylor situation, Peterson going back and forth with the media. Liam Cohen gets to stay in Florida, gets to work with the quarterback on a big contract, so he doesn't have to go searching for his guy. Left tackle figured out, young pieces on defense. Jacksonville, yes, they had a horrible season. Yes, they had a ton of losses. But personally, I think if they get the right coach in there, they could turn it around pretty quickly. And that's just my opinion, but I do believe Liam Cohen makes a lot of sense. So again, if Johnson lands with the Raiders, according to the latest reports and rumors, Jacksonville could pursue Liam Cohen. Now, there's also, talks about Robert Saleh. I'm personally not the biggest fan of that fit, just because, I guess first off, Saleh hasn't really had that much time to reflect on what went wrong. He jumped immediately to the Green Bay Packers. Right, so when he's interviewing with these jobs, Dallas Cowboys supposedly are interested, Jacksonville Jaguars again. Yes, of course, you have that knowledge of the Jaguars roster, but there's so many in-depth questions, right? If I was Shad Khan, I would be asking Saleh, what went wrong with the Jets? Where were your biggest weaknesses? If I hire you here, I don't want you to be, grasping at straws, not having a clue what to do on the offensive side of the football, not knowing how to help put Trevor in a position to have success, how to construct an offensive staff. All major issues with the New York Jets, right? And again, it would be different if Saleh spent a year off or, landed with the Niners as DC or something for a year or two. Then he has that time to really kind of think back, okay, this is what went well, this is where I succeeded, this is where I failed, the positives, the negatives in my previous job. Because now Saleh's in a position where he has to handle all of that stuff, try to come up with answers, while at the same time trying to figure out the correct path for the Jacksonville Jaguars moving forward. So, it's very difficult. I think if you're ownership and you're hiring a guy, think back to Adam Gase going from the Dolphins to the Jets. And by the way, it's different if you're talking about like a veteran mind, like Mike McCarthy. He's been doing it for 18 years. I think he's going to be fine with it, right? Going like if he gets a job this cycle. But a younger coach like Saleh, I feel like it's a lot on his plate. Now, there's also a lot of talk that the Jaguars like Joe Brady a lot too. So I'm pretty intrigued by this Jaguars search. I feel like they're a bit of a wild card. you can throw out a team and talk about 2-3 different guys that make a lot of sense. I could see Jacksonville going in a ton of different directions, just like shocking everyone. So we focus in on the Chicago Bears, and yes, they're like the Jets, right? They're interviewing everyone under the sun. I think Eddie George was the most recent named. I think I believe they're up to 15 or 16 different head coaching interview requests in total. So tons, right? Tons of different options that they're looking at. It does feel like it's Ben Johnson or Mike McCarthy as the two top favorites, with Brian Flores kind of in that sneaky third role because of the relationship between Flores and Ryan Poles. The fan reaction of a Brian Flores hiring in Chicago seems to be very, very negative, because Brian Flores is someone who is a defensive-minded head coach and has struggled to develop young quarterbacks in the past. And you kind of feel like Chicago's hire needs to be someone who can put Caleb in the best position to have success, really make sure that he's maximizing his talents, and puts forward a good development plan for him. And Flores, it's like, I just don't know if you get that. So according to rumors and reports, it does look like Ben Johnson and McCarthy have, look to be the favorites at this point in time. And so to shift gears, I wanted to pair the Jets and the Saints together here, kind of have these two teams back to back, because I feel like, with all of the Aaron Glenn buzz, right? He's the favorite with the Jets, but he's also the favorite with the Saints. And Aaron Glenn can obviously only go to one place. He has connections to the Jets. Well, he also has connections to the Saints. Working with Loomis, former Saint player, being a DB coach there, right? Sean Payton coaching tree, Dan Campbell, been around all these great coaches. And then, of course, with the Jets, right, we've talked a lot about the different dots that we can connect, the Tannenbaum connection, the Jets connection, him understanding the fan base, him understanding the pressure that comes with playing and performing well within this market, having that Parcells connection as well. There's a lot. I mean, Aaron Glenn makes a lot of sense for both destinations here. To me, it does feel 50-50. And that's what a lot of the reports are suggesting, right? That it's going to come down to the Saints or the Jets for Aaron Glenn. Now, on Tuesday, the Saints are bringing in Mike Kafka for a second interview. They're also bringing back Anthony Weaver for a second interview, right? Anthony Weaver, obviously Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator, did really good things with that Dolphins defense, especially towards the tail end of the season. Someone who is kind of regarded as a player's coach. He actually reminds me a lot of Robert Saleh when he was with the 49ers, right? Players loved him, had a pretty experienced background working in a lot of different destinations, working under great coaches. Weaver, of course, coming over to Miami from that Baltimore Ravens coaching tree. And in fact, Weaver was actually one of the finalists for the Washington Commanders job last season, right? If we think back, it was obviously Dan Quinn, Aaron Glenn, Anthony Weaver. Who headed up that search? Rick Spielman. So I actually felt like I was surprised when Weaver didn't get an interview request by the Jets. Maybe they did and he declined it. But, at this point in time, it's looking like Weaver will be a finalist for that New Orleans Saints job. One thing I'm really interested in is the plan B, or the fallback plan for whoever doesn't land Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson. Right, again, if Johnson goes to the Raiders, what do the Jaguars do? If Johnson goes to the Jags, where do the Raiders pivot? I think Brian Flores kind of feels like one of those guys that is in like that next group, right? Again, Aaron Glenn, say he goes to the Saints, where do the Jets pivot? Do they go Flores? If the Jets go with Glenn, what direction do the Saints go? Mike McCarthy? If the Saints go Mike McCarthy and Ben Johnson's off the board, well, where does Chicago go? Again, that's where Brian Flores feels like he's winding up in this whole thing. But it's going to be fascinating, right? Keep in mind, we have not talked about Cliff Kingsbury. We have not talked about Todd Monken as well. We have not talked about Kellen Moore. It's interesting because the Dallas Cowboys job feels completely separate from all the other openings. It feels like the guys that Dallas is interested in aren't really close to the names that we've been hearing linked to all these other teams. Although I could see Aaron Glenn making sense with Dallas, because you really feel like Dallas needs a leader to step into the team. They need to get an innovative defensive mind to kind of rejuvenate things, to get guys to buy back in. It just feels like the vibe is kind of off with Dallas right now. Glenn, of course, being a defensive-minded guy, has a quarterback figured out in Dak Prescott, right? Number one wide receiver in CeeDee Lamb. Like they that's a team that, you could step in and immediately win 10 games, immediately win 11 games. And so, again, if you are a guy like Aaron Glenn, or any of these candidates that are interested in that Cowboys job, I mean, the talent, they have a lot of talent on that Cowboys team. So man, I think things this week are going to be really heating up, and we're still waiting on that second list of interviews for general manager and head coach for the Jets. Ideally, let's hire a GM first and then go out and target that head coach. But in any case, let me know your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you guys. And as always, go Jets.